Hi folks, thanks for watching my monologue. As you may have heard, there's been a recent run on guns and ammunition. I just wanted to let you know that Guns Etc. is in a 10,200 square foot building which holds a lot of guns. So Guns Etc. is open and has a lot of product. Or you can go to gunsetc.com, that's gunsetc.com. And if you like my monologue, please subscribe to our channel using 960 The Patriot. Welcome back and happy May 13th, 2020. The courts, especially the Supreme Court and the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C., are in the news a bunch lately. Whenever the issue of judges and courts come up, I'm reminded of why we see them so much and why they are so much in the news when they are. And it's something Alexis de Tocqueville observed in Democracy in America. He wrote, quote, "There is hardly any political question in the United States that sooner or later does not turn into a judicial question. From that, the obligation that the parties find in their daily polemics to borrow ideas and language from the judicial system. Since most public men are or have formerly been jurists, they make the habits and the turn of ideas that belong to jurists pass into the handling of public affairs. The jury ends up by familiarizing all classes with them. Thus, judicial language becomes in a way the common language. So the spirit of the jurist, born inside the schools and courtrooms, spreads little by little beyond their confines. It infiltrates all of society, so to speak. It descends to the lowest ranks, and the entire people finishes by acquiring a part of the habits and tastes of the magistrate," close quote. This is not a good thing. But it is why the parties, and especially the Democratic Party, make partisan politics and the judiciary and judicial appointments such a blood sport. Why not use their experts as super legislature or super majorities to get what they want or cannot get at the ballot box? That's what they think. Well, to start, that's not what the courts were for, neither in the view of the Federalist writers nor in the view of even our first Supreme Court justice, never mind chief justices. As John Marshall put it, we must never forget that it is a constitution we are expounding. While all this new court talk and chatter is going on, you're also seeing more and more claims of violations of constitutional rights. Some I agree with, some perhaps not, but constitutionalism is certainly back in the air, and that is a good thing. But it does require us to understand the Constitution and the point of it. One can claim something is constitutional or anti-constitutional, but it doesn't make it so. Any more than, per Jerry Seinfeld, one can say they have your reservation even if they don't hold it. In thinking about our Constitution, I always like to start out by relating the story Walter Burns tells in his book, Making Patriots. Quote, "Our unique place in the world is recognized elsewhere, sometimes grudgingly or inadvertently. In 1987, the bicentenary of our Constitution, I was in Brazil, where the people had recently overthrown a military dictatorship and had begun the process of writing a democratic constitution. I had been invited to lecture on constitutionalism. At one place, a university, after I had finished my prepared remarks, someone got up and denounced me. But the local someone had got up and denounced not me, but the local official who had sponsored my appearance. 'Why,' he shouted, 'did you invite an American? What can an American tell us about constitutions? They've only had one. Why didn't you invite a Bolivian? They've had 100. Let's stay with Burns a few moments. He goes on to write, "It would be convenient to believe that citizens will be patriots, but in fact, neither citizenship nor patriotism can be taken for granted, especially in a liberal democracy like the United States. In the traditional or Spartan sense, patriots are citizens who love their country simply because it is their country, because it is the birthplace and the mansion of their fathers," as Alexis de Tocqueville put it in Democracy in America as well. Citizenship and patriotism were one and the same thing in the classic understanding, say in Sparta. It was kind of a filial piety. But America is not Sparta. Citizenship has, first of all, a legal meaning for us. According to the Constitution, 14th Amendment, a citizen is any person born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. But citizenship is even for us more than legal status and the enjoyment of the privileges or immunities attached thereto. In its larger sense, it's a sentiment or state of mind, an awareness of sharing an identity with others to whom one is related by nationality if not by blood, a sense of belonging to a community for which one bears some responsibility. In a word, citizenship implies public spiritedness, and it is in this sense that it cannot be taken for granted. Like patriotism, it has to be cultivated. It has to be cultivated because no one is born loving his country. Such love is not natural, but has to be somehow taught or acquired. A person may not even be born to love himself. The authorities differ on this, but he soon enough learns to do so, and unless something is done about it, he'll continue to do so, and in a manner that makes a concern for country and fellow countrymen or anyone other than himself difficult, if not impossible, to have. The problem is as old as politics, and no country is exempt from having to deal with it. But for reasons having to do with our democratic principles, we cannot do so as others before us have. Think of it this way. Socrates, the first political philosopher, proposed a comprehensive program of education for guardians of the city. As described by Plato, this consisted of a carefully designed program in gymnastics for the body and music for the soul. Socrates then suggests that the guardians be told a tale. The tale is meant to persuade them that it is natural for them to love and care for their city, their polis. They must be told that they only dreamed they had been educated in and by their city, that they were born of the earth and were fully formed along with their weapons while in it, and that the earth, which is their mother, had then sent them up, and that now, as though their land were their mother and nurse, they must plan for it and defend it, and they must think of the other citizens as brothers and born of this same earth. It's hard to believe that anyone, least of all an American, could credit this tale, but it does serve to highlight this most fundamental of political problems. Beside the Spartans seem to believe it, or to be more precise, something like it. Despite our practice of celebrating it as the birthplace of democracy and the nursery of Western civilization, Athens was not like America either. Pericles makes that clear as well. He says Athenians were lovers of wisdom, which suggests that their constitution, like ours, protected freedom of speech and freedom of religion, but after what amounted to a fair trial, they did execute Socrates for his impiety, didn't they? There was no separation of church and state in Athens, nor was there anything resembling what we might call civil society or mediating structures, the sort of private associations that Tocqueville remarked about on his visit to America. Makes one think about how the left today tries to vitiate our private associations and their attendant necessities like freedom of speech, religion, and association. But nothing distinguishes us so sharply from the classical republic or bears more directly on the issue of citizenship than the principles governing our birth as a nation and then incorporated in the republic we ordained and established. These principles gave rise to an altogether new understanding of what it means to be a patriotic citizen. To paraphrase a line from Abraham Lincoln's 1862 message to Congress, our case was new, so we had to think and act anew. Here it's appropriate to say a few words about the newness of our case, or to recall the motto inscribed at the Great Seal of the United States, what you see on every dollar bill, what it is that made for a Novus Ordo Seclorum, which is to say a new order of the ages. We were the first nation to declare its independence by appealing not to the past, but to the newly discovered laws of nature and nature's God, and this had and has consequences for patriotism. Whereas the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob imposed duties on all men, see Exodus. Nature's God endowed all men with rights, and whereas the God of the New Testament commanded all men to love God as their neighbors and as themselves, as in Matthew, nature's God created a state of nature in which everyone was expected to take care of himself, and as John Locke put it, take care of others only when his own preservation comes not in competition with them. And so long as he remains in the state of nature, he has the right to do what he is naturally inclined to do. And what he is naturally inclined to do is not to take care of others. To say the least, he is not naturally inclined to be a patriotic citizen. In fact, he is not naturally inclined to be a citizen of any kind. Endowed by nature with certain private rights, he enters civil society and then agrees to be governed, but only in order to secure private rights. He is a far cry from the Athenian described by Pericles. Glory and empire mean nothing to us. His aspiration is to lead an essentially private life, joining, but only if he so wishes, one or another of the private associations constituting what has come to be called civil society. Church, synagogue, labor union, trade association, club, whatever. He asks of government only that it protect his rights, and the government, besides asking him to respect the rights of others, should ask very little of him. In return, he's expected to perform his civic duties, of course, but he's not required to do so. For example, he's not required to vote or to hold public office. He lives in a self-governing democracy, but unlike the citizens of every other existing democracy in history, he himself is not necessarily a governor. Governing is done by his representatives. It is, of course, true that he is required to surrender his natural rights when leaving the state of nature, except, of course, the few unalienable ones, the surrender of which would contradict the very purpose of the flight from nature. But in exchange, he gains the security that only government can provide. For example, the Constitution makes it clear that he cannot be deprived of life, liberty, and property without the due process of law. Ask Michael Flynn. As John Jay says in Federalist 2, nothing is more certain than the indispensable necessity of government. It is equally undeniable that whenever and however it is instituted, the people must cede to it some of their natural rights in order to vest it with requisite powers. Nevertheless, it remains true with us that rights are primary and duties are secondary and derivative. I think that's important to keep in mind just now on a whole host of issues. And I don't know, it seemed to me just now we could have all used a reminder on this. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.